Here I am, about to die. My back holding the door closed, staring at a Bible on the floor. It was open to Revelations. How ironic. I could hear the zombies pounding and screaming on the other side of the door. And all I could think of is this is far from how I imagined it ending for me. I guess I should explain how I found myself here. The apocalypse had been nothing like the scriptures had predicted. The end times came when babies were being infected by the millions within the womb. They called it a holocaust of the unborn. They all died inside the mother at 7 months and infected them. The fungus used the unborn as incubators and evolution chambers. Doctors and scientists couldn't figure out what had happened and what was happening. Why no more children were surviving until birth, and why all the mothers seemed to go insane and start attacking people. Of course, that was long ago, and we know now what it was. It started 9 years ago, when the fungus known as cordyceps evolved to take human hosts, starting with unborn babies and progressing from there at an astounding rate. The last broadcast from the CDC was 6 years ago, and it reported that 93% of the human population was infected and under the control of the zombie fungus. These weren't your cliche undead zombies you see and hear about in the movies either. These creatures were very much alive. They just weren't human anymore. They barely even resembled a human. Their bodies were covered in a massive volcanic blister that protruded long, fine hairs of fungus that resembled tendrils and oozed a red-black fluid. They didn't even have eyes anymore. Just large, hollow sockets, seeping ooze. And if you looked closely, you could see the white tendrils of fungus just inside, moving around. The mouth, it was just as grotesque. Their whole bodies had become a weapon of transfer for the fungus, and they moved with surprising speed and intelligence, problem solving and working their way around objects. And the sounds they emitted were guttural and terrifying to even the most hardened of people. I can't tell you the last time I saw the sun. Day in and day out, it's just this thick, gray, ashy mist covering everything like a thick blanket. I can barely see the moss-covered barbed wire walls of the building I now call home. All the once green lands of the earth were no more than ash and charcoal. The air was heavy with the smell of burnt flesh and smoke. It all hung in a haze that partially obscured the blood-red sun. The cities stood like skeletons, barren wastelands, empty now that the fungus had taken whatever the fire did not. Even the ocean stood still like semi-stagnant pools of death and decay. There were no waves. Even the wind had left the earth. The skies were barren. No birds flew or sang. All the while, the oppressive heat rained down like the breath of hell. This wasn't caused by the fungus, but more of a byproduct of it. Fires went unchecked and nuclear power plants went critical. Many parts of the world became inhospitable to life entirely. The radiation from the plants killed off most life that the fungus didn't get to. So even though the fungus only infected humans, it still killed everything in the end. My home was an old mental hospital, and I've been living here for the last 3 years. It's the safest place within 100 miles, surrounded by a dense, dead forest and 20-foot barbed wire walls. At one point, this was the home of those outcast by society. But now, it serves as a refuge for me. It's funny that at one time, this place was a prison to many broken souls. And now it serves as nothing more than my sanctuary. The walls of the facility are decorated with drawings and scribbles of whatever madmen used to take residence in this God-forsaken place. The images, they're impossible to decipher. Drawings and scribbles of a madman. But the words are unmistakable. They're drawn in thick slashes of rusty red and faded black, and they appear over and over. It's all in your head. It's all in your head. It's all in your head, over and over. The same thing. Sometimes it made me think I was the one who was in fact insane. When it all started, it was just David, Ryan, myself, and my dog Titan defending a small house in Missouri for the first few years. I never ended up seeing my brother or father or my nephew again. I suspected they may have left to some bunker or remote area well before things got out of hand and just left me behind. You know, a less mouths to feed kind of thing. I'm sure. At least, that's what I tell myself. My brother did always talk about preparing for the apocalypse and the end of the world and all that sort of paranoid stuff, and I just assumed he was, paranoid. Like anybody would. Turns out he was the one that was right. Should have listened. David died about 4 years ago when Ryan and myself and Titan were out scavenging for food. When we got back to our street, we found that there was people in the house. They were having some sort of feast, it seemed like. We got closer to investigate and saw that they were eating David. They were eating my friend. We just ran and got the hell out of there, man. And in the process of running, somehow Ryan got separated from me and we never saw each other again. I don't know what happened to him. Sometimes I wonder. I think that maybe he found a safe haven and that my friend's alright. Titan survived for the next 5 years. He ended up dying in his sleep at the hospital with me. He was the luckiest and probably the best of us. Nobody gets to die of old age anymore. I really miss him. There was one other person here with me. A woman. But I almost never saw her. Usually only in the early mornings, and that was once in a great while. I didn't know who she was, or where she came from, or what she does all day and night. But she always seemed to have fresh supplies, and she freely shared them with me, so I didn't bother her, and I let her do whatever she does without my interference. I really didn't know anything about her, but she really didn't seem to want my help on anything either. She did wear a tag that said Wolf on it, so that's what I called her. Really, the only worst part about her was the fact that she just about never spoke. So, most of my conversations with her were just one-sided. It was still better than speaking to the wall by myself. I did suspect she was an old patient or a nurse before the outbreak happened. Unfortunately, I haven't seen her in a few weeks, and I worry that she may have been infected or killed. And since I hadn't seen her in a while, I figured I should probably go search for her. But first I needed to search her stash and find food, because I was running low, and I I figured if she was dead or missing, she wouldn't mind if I took and raided her stores. So there I was. I was in the facility food storage, prying open the last can of green beans before I headed off to search for my only companion, when I heard a noise in the main hallway. Immediately, terror coursed through my body the moment I heard the sound, because I knew exactly what it was. It was unmistakable. Immediately, I quickly took off my shoes and softly walked towards the door, as quietly as I possibly could. Slowly, I peered my head out the door to assess the situation. That's when I saw it. The zombie was missing its jaw, likely ripped off by its last victim in one last desperate attempt to stay alive. Its snake-like brown-gray intestines hanging to the floor as it stood perfectly still, listening for noise. Its white fungi tendrils swaying back and forth for guidance, seeking out any movement or noise. How did it get in here? I start to worry that there may be more as I hear more sounds from all directions. Immediately, I jump into action. I picked up a chair and threw it to the far side of the hall, away from the door and my only means of escape. It turned towards the noise. I could hear the bones in its stiffening neck creak as it turned its grotesque head. With a snap and a cry, it lurched in the other direction. I needed no other cue. I dived for the door and bolted out into the hallway, running in the opposite direction, drinking in the air, knowing very well each gulp could be my last. Then from behind me came another moan, and another to the right and to the left, looking in every direction. I kept running, and it was a horde. They were bursting from everywhere. Even the storeroom I was just in, I couldn't figure it out. Where were they coming from? I didn't have time to figure it out. I had to get to safety, and so I ran and fought my way through the horde. At one point, I fell and felt a stabbing pain like someone reached out and ripped my arm off with their bare hands. It was so intense, but I scrambled back up, shoving the zombie off me, and dashed for the closest room, desperately trying to close the door behind me, throwing my weight into the door, finally getting it closed. I locked the door and slid to the ground, so very tired, and in so much pain. The pain throbbed in my arm. It's deep and warm, but not in a nice way. It feels like someone has their hand in there and is squeezing my muscles as hard as they can. When it wanes, I can move, but when it returns, I can only hold still and breathe. Breathe slow and deep until it has passed. There's blood pouring from the wound in my arm. It's turned purple and lumpy where it should be smooth. Every little movement feels like a nail bomb exploding in my body. All I want to do is sleep and let it take me away into the next life. I'm so tired now. The pain, it's gone. It's the pain that had once burned like fire had faded away to an icy numbness. Black filled the edges of my vision, and the only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. Seconds passed as I lay there, thinking of how naive to the darkness of the real world I was, but how used to it I am now. The despair and suffering, the world that took everyone I loved away from me. I would soon be joining them, though. I'd be able to leave all the pain behind. So I closed my eyes, and my heart beat one last time. Slowly, I become aware of another noise, pulling me back from the darkness I so long for, refusing to let me be free. I struggle to open my eyes. Everything is so blurry, I can just barely make out the figure in front of me. But I recognize her anyways. It's Wolf. Thank God she is alive. Relief fills my soul at the sight of her. I try to move, but I can't. Confused, I look down at my arms and legs. They were bound to the bed. What's going on? I start to panic, and then it hits me. It all comes flooding back. Everything I've done. I killed them all. I murdered and ate all my friends, my family, all of them. I killed them all. I look at the nurse horrified, and she just smiles at me. He grabs a hold of my mouth and forces 2 pills down my throat. And I drift back off to the warm embrace of sleep.